and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast. This is Lauren, and I manage the Adulting is Easy blog and podcast, which can be found at realadultingiseasy.com and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please take a second and hit the follow button wherever you're listening if you can safely do so and you haven't already. Please also rate and review and all of that as well. Thank you so much to everyone that's done it. I'm joined today by Marianne Bornhoft, an award-winning realtor at Windermere Manito in Spokane, Washington, and has over 27 years experience in both residential and commercial real estate. Marianne and her husband Chris own Bornhoft Real Estate, which is a commercial brokerage. Their latest project is called Garage Lodge, which is a 23-unit garage condo complex. Marianne was the chair of member communications for the National Association of Realtors and the 2013 president of the Spokane Association of Realtors. She was also a past director for the Washington Association of Realtors, as well as a past director for the National Association of Realtors. Also, she is director of outdoor sales for Blue Dot Energies. Wow. Thanks for joining me, Marianne.
Glad to be here.
This episode is sponsored by Jasmine Mortgage Team. Jasmine's team is one of the top 10 women-led mortgage lenders in the nation with over 20 years of experience. Jasmine Mortgage Team offers conventional jumbo, FHA, doctor loans, and more. Head on over to jasminemortgageteam.com and tell them Lauren from Adulting is Easy sent you. Again, that's jasminemortgageteam.com. As usual, our goal for today is to make adulting a bit easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a big part of adulting. So today the topic is real estate, and we're actually going to dive into, Marianne, how you help change STR regulations in your city. Before we get into that, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into real estate and got interested in short-term rentals and things like that?
Well, my name is Marianne, and I am from Spokane. I have been a realtor for over 27 years. I love real estate. When I was a small child, this is the truth. My mom would take me to allergy shots on every Friday, and we would drive by all these cool homes in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up in the West Hills. And I was fascinated by all the different styles of architecture. And I made my mom buy me a book about that, which she was just blown away. She didn't know who this child was so fascinated about houses. And so I would say, I want to buy that one. I want to buy that one. And I thought, that's a Tudor, Mom. And that's a Georgian, and that's a Cape Cod. My mom's like, you are 4 years old. How do you know this? So at a young age, I just fell in love with houses in general and kind of pushed it aside, thought that's crazy. Why would I ever? I don't know if I'm going to do that. But I just thought, I really loved architecture. I really love design. I really love that whole, your home. You don't own the home. You're a caretaker of the home. I'm a historical home specialist now. So I just really, I think it's just in my DNA. So fast forward, I moved to Spokane right out of college, 4th of July, 1989. And it was my Independence Day, 21, moving to Spokane, not knowing anything, lived in a little apartment, and the apartment did not have the right type. It was built the year before code. And so the dryer didn't have a vent. So all this, it had a lint trap, but I guess the lint trap fell off, and then all this lint was going everywhere. And one day my dryer, it caught on fire or something. And so I immediately, put it out, and my clothes were smoky, and I called the management company, and we had been there about 3 months, and they were not happy. And I said, well, you didn't even disclose this to me. You probably should have told me that, I should check this lint trap. I thought it was because of the back of the dryer. And they're like, it's not our responsibility. And then the next day I got a notice saying your rent's going up. And I'm like, that's interesting timing. So I decided to look for homes, and I bought my first home when I was 22. And I bought my first rental. I think I was 20. Well, before I was 30, I owned 5 homes before I was 30 and just loved real estate. But I didn't become a realtor until I was 27. So for me, it was just really organic, and it was just a natural fit. I was in a TV show in Idaho, in Coeur d'Alene, and it was a Patty Duke TV show. I had done a movie with her earlier. And so she was so sweet. She asked me to be in the TV show. And so I was a featured day player extra. And then I got a cast the choir, and it was a TV show about church. And it was called The Amazing Grace was the name of the show. And I was in 5 of the 6 episodes. And it was wonderful. But then in the middle, on the 5th episode, I miscarried. And that's why I didn't do the 6th. But I was really upset and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I found out that there was a real estate agency opening up in my town that I really liked. And I thought I should maybe do this. So instead of feeling sorry for myself, laying on the couch, I got up, I made a phone call. The next thing I know, I'm in the office studying for my real estate exam. And in January 1995, I got my real estate license. I was Rookie of the Year that first year. It was an amazing experience. I did over 26 open houses every other weekend. It was like I dated all these houses. Like I was just constantly doing opens, trying to meet people. And it just fit. Like it just felt like I was coming home, literally, no pun intended. I just love selling real estate. I love helping people and make their dreams come true. And so just for me, I just felt like I'd found my place. And it was so wonderful. But most people don't understand Spokane. So we are a town, a little over 200,000 people. The greater inland Northwest is about 550,000 people. We're in the northeast side of Washington State. We call it the other east side. And we are right next to northern Idaho. So Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene is right next door, literally like a bedroom community of Spokane. So I had this interesting experience where Spokane was the site of the 1974 World's Fair. We are the smallest city to ever host the World's Fair. So we had a problem. We didn't have enough hotels to house all the people that were coming from all over the world to visit Spokane. So what we had to do is there was a call that went out to everyone in our community. Please open your doors, your spare bedrooms, your basements. You know, you have an RV, can someone pitch a tent in your yard? And that's what happened. It grew organically in Spokane. And that created the boom of, believe it or not, the short-term rental situation in Spokane. So after Expo 74, people kind of liked that idea. A lot of Airbnbs, they weren't called Airbnbs or they weren't called VRBOs. They weren't called anything, but they were called homestays. So they were like short-term rentals. They were like what we see today, but they were a little more organic. I mean, you didn't have the internet back in 1974. So usually someone would post it out in the paper or you'd get a referral from someone, and there were actually agencies that handled short-term rentals. So a lot of bed and breakfasts were created out of that need. Fast forward to about 10 years ago, the bed and breakfast economy was kind of waning. And they were very upset that these people were renting out their homes for short-term rentals. And they started to complain to our code enforcement officer. And it became really an issue for the bed and breakfast. But the problem is that this is how people were, it was the gig economy in Spokane. We were literally doing what we had always done back in the day, but the bed and breakfast people were mad because we were cutting into their business. The problem is that as a realtor, I would sell people homes that they wanted to do short-term rentals, but there was no regulation and there was no monitoring of what was going on, except the code said it was a $240 fine if you rented your house less than 30 days. Now think about that. You have a visiting nurse who comes to Spokane for 3 weeks. You're a doctor. You have this beautiful ensuite in your basement that you built for your mother or mother-in-law, and you don't know, she doesn't visit that often, so you rent it out to a visiting nurse. You know, he, she, whoever the nurse is, they rent from you. Everything's great. The bed and breakfast finds out you get a fine of $240 until you go and you appeal it or you go and you pay it. And sometimes it's like a lot of money because it's for the time that the person was in the house. So I heard about this through a few of my clients and my friends and decided that we should probably do something about this and change the law. We decided to make a difference in our community. So we started having weekly meetings about how can we change the law? How can we make it better and more user-friendly for not only the owners of the short-term rentals, but also for the consumer? People were using these platforms already. People were actively posting their homes on these platforms for their short-term rentals without realizing that they were actually breaking the law. No one knew. There was no knowledge of this, but then they'd get a fine in the mail and they're like, wait a minute, I didn't even know there was a problem. And they had to pay it. I mean, it was significant. So my friend told me she had like a $2,000 bill from the city. And so we went to the city and said, look, we've got to fix this. So it was a stakeholder group consisting of about 8 people. And there was short-term rental owners. There were bed and breakfast owners. And I was the token realtor on this group. And we met all the time to try to figure this out. Now, in the beginning, it was really, really difficult. But keep in mind, we used to have like 20 or 30 bed and breakfasts in Spokane. In the end, I think we had 2 left, maybe. And so, they should have seen the writing on the wall, but they just didn't want to lose their source of income. And they didn't think that they could become a short-term rental. Now, why that is, I don't know. So they were really, really against the future. And we had to move that gigantic ship in the right direction, which took about 2 years to finally finish what we started. In the end, the short-term rental code was changed for the better. We had a unanimous approval by all of the city council members of Spokane, which at the time was almost impossible because they were so divisive and always at odds with each other. When they voted, city council meetings are on Monday. When they voted, we literally got up and cheered. Like, we were so excited. And it was the bed and breakfast people and it was the short-term rental people. We were all together, unified for the greater good of Spokane. That business model was amazing. Like, we really knocked it out of the park. And I'm very proud for what we did at that time. I think it was revolutionary. It was innovative. It was inclusive. It was sustainable. It was everything you want to have for that program. And it was an easy permitting process, like $100. You just notify your neighbors, you comply. They come and inspect your property and you're good. Now, fast forward many years later, we do have a little bit of an issue now. So I'd be happy to share that with you if you have any questions.
I know I didn't want to interrupt. You wove that story perfectly. I love how you got into real estate. That's awesome. You bought your first home so young and then just kind of kept buying, then became a realtor. So you can really tell that real estate is part of your DNA. And then I thought you did an awesome job of talking about the history of short-term rentals in Spokane. I had no idea about that 1974 World's Fair. And it's interesting that they would have it there without enough places for people to stay. So what an interesting conundrum and what an innovative way to alleviate that pinch by having people, share their homes. So just absolutely incredible. And then the bed and breakfasts is interesting too, where they felt threatened by the other short-term rentals and then started dwindling in numbers. So I think it's kind of interesting that really made it, let's make this a thing, if you will. Let's regulate this. Let's figure this out together. Absolutely love that. And I think what you were talking about with people start short-term rentals and they just assume it's allowed because there are a lot of them happens a lot.
Yeah, I think, well, it's interesting because I think at the time when the World's Fair happened, there was a lot of planning. There was actually history that goes into what happened in Spokane and why they did it. Basically, we had a really bad downtown. I mean, people talk about their downtowns being horrible with homeless people. We actually had that in Spokane. It was so bad. There was a train station. The train station was right on this island in the downtown Spokane corridor because Spokane has the second largest urban waterfall in the lower 48. And so we had this beautiful waterfall and we had this island of homeless people living by the train station. And so the city, the pillars of the community, they got together and they decided to clean up our downtown, literally, and they proposed to do this wonderful renovation of our downtown core. The great thing about that is it really changed Spokane forever, and it brought the world's eye on Spokane. So we had to make it really pretty. So Spokane's park system was designed by the Olmsted brothers, who designed New York Central Park. Our design for all of our communities that every single neighborhood has to have a park. Now we have some parks that are small and we have some parks that are large, but our riverfront park is phenomenal. Recently, a few years ago, we did have a $40 million bond that renovated the park. So it's now just as nice as it was back in 1974 with the World's Fair. And environment was the theme. So it was really, really a great opportunity for Spokane to shine in the eyes of the world. And they did realize and recognize that there was going to be a problem pretty quickly. But the Spokane residents opened their doors and their hearts to everyone, just like they do now. It's just now it's regulated. So I love it. I love the program. I love the city. I love having my clients come to town and I put them in a short-term rental. And I love housing those actors because they love living in neighborhoods. And right now I can tell you there's an actor in Spokane living in a short-term rental for a movie that's happening soon.
That's amazing. I love that. It's so cool. You've had such a cool career. So tell us a little bit more about the process then. Obviously there was a lot of strife there, right? And homeowners, hosts are getting unexpectedly hit with these fines left and right. But on the other end of things, the bed and breakfasts are losing out on revenue and are actually closing. What was that like?
It was pretty heartbreaking. The reason why a lot of people have a short-term rental is their income. It is supplementing their income, or it's their main income. I mean, there's a little old lady that she had to rent out a room because her husband passed away and she had to pay these taxes. So she had to rent out a room so she could stay in her house. I mean, she was physically able to stay in her house, but it took the edge off of it for her, having that opportunity where she can rent out a room and she can be stable financially. And if their taxes are raised, it's okay. She has that nice buffer. But, do you really want to find an 82-year-old grandmother? I mean, give me a break.
So you obviously don't want to find the 82-year-old grandma, but you also, to some extent, want to know how many short-term rentals there are. You want them to get inspected. You want neighbors to know. I think a lot of times when we talk about regulation with short-term rentals, we think of it as a bad thing, but in some ways, it's giving you permission to do it.
I think it's really important to understand regulation and the intent. Regulation sets a parameter for someone to stay in the lines, but in between those lines, there's lots of variables and lots of opportunity. It's not that they want to stop people from making money. It's not that they want to, stop the gig economy. They want to protect personal property rights. So by having a very specific regulation that protects the short-term rental owner and protects the neighborhood and the surrounding community, that's the way to go. That's the wave of the future. That helps us all understand, who's the player in this market, and if there's a problem, who do we go to? Where are they located? How do we reach them? And if we like them, how do we celebrate them? How do we use them as a model for the nation for short-term rentals, not just in Spokane, but in every other city? So our intent was broad-based, loose enough where everyone can have what they want, but also strict enough so you didn't have the party with the 50 people, college graduation party or bachelorette party or whatever, next door. So, I mean, I love how it turned out. It enabled the city to have people register so they knew who was doing it, and we promoted it. It got on the news. They wrote about it. I mean, everyone at the time really embraced it. Then it exploded. And then we started having problems because everyone realized this is the way to make money. This is what I want to do. The pandemic happened. People were in their homes more. And then they realized, I need to fix my house up. I would like to make money off my house. I would like to make my situation better. Maybe I want to buy a different house. Maybe I want to turn the current house into a short-term rental, because in the beginning of the pandemic, if you remember, the market was really hard. I mean, I was selling homes and people weren't looking at them. I sold 5 homes. People never walked in before they bought them. So it was a very scary, scary time. So people who were smart enough, they started to create this gig economy to supplement their incomes. A lot of people got laid off and people were still traveling, believe it or not. So realtors were buying them. Consumers were still coming to Spokane. It was just a little less, but we never really stopped. The explosion happened. Now they say there's about 800 short-term rentals. Now I haven't checked our city log today, but I think only like 100 are registered. So now we have a problem. Now we need to go and inform all of those people, hey, you have to put your license on your registry on that short-term rental platform. And we haven't inspected you and you haven't notified your neighbors. And they're not fining right now. It's just more of a re-education. But some people fall out of the jurisdiction of our short-term rental code. So now we need to go back to the drawing board. I already talked to the city and I said, hey, I'm volunteering if you want me to help, update the code, because we never addressed the downtown core because that's considered commercial and does not fall into the code for short-term rentals. That falls into a totally different class of hotel, motel, lodging. So these people are buying apartment buildings, they're renovating apartment buildings, and they're doing short-term rentals. The problem is there's still issues with parties, events. We don't know who they are, but the city hasn't figured out how to regulate them because technically they're considered a hotel, but they're short-term rental. So they're a gray area. We got to figure this out. Those apartment owners do not want to pay the hotel motel tax that comes with that lovely benefit of having a short-term rental. They want to just have it and pay a very small fee. But when we created the short-term rental program, we wanted everyone to pay their fair share of taxes, to pay that tax correctly. And they're getting regulated. They're paying their fees correctly, but the downtown ones aren't. There are a lot of properties downtown that are not being regulated, and there are some problems. So I sure hope the city of Spokane they'll probably hear this podcast, but because you're pretty popular, Lauren. People tell me all the time, have you heard this podcast? I'm like, yes, I have. Yes. Yeah, she's amazing. And I love her. And someday I'll go visit her and it'll be awesome in Florida. But so I think that realistically, the city of Spokane needs to figure this out. And if you're Lauren, if you're a short-term rental owner and your neighbor isn't regulated and you're doing everything right and you are getting the income, but they're having wild parties and they're not being regulated and it's disrupting your neighborhood, you don't like that. That's not fun for you. That's not fun for your short-term tenants. I mean, they're not going to like that. They're here to have a good time in the town. They're here to be on vacation or for business, and an unregulated short-term rental next door is not following the rules of quiet enjoyment after 10 p.m., that can be a problem. So all we want to do is make it a fair, level playing field for everyone. People who do this should just follow rules. Like we all have driver's licenses, right? We all have to follow the rules of the road. And if you don't, you should get fined because you'll damage someone. You'll hurt someone. You can hurt yourself. Same thing with unregulated short-term rentals. I don't own one. But I do have a story about what I bought a house for, and it didn't turn out like I thought.
Well, yeah, I think short-term rentals should be a win-win, right? It should be a win for the guests, it should be a win for the host, and it should be a win for the municipalities, whatever they are. There's no reason that anyone should be getting the short end of the stick, in my opinion. So, what's your story?
So there's this wonderful, I'm going to give them props. There's this wonderful restaurant/entertainment venue in Spokane. It reminds me kind of New Orleans, where every day there's a band. Every day they have live music. So I was in the restaurant waiting for my husband to arrive. I was sitting at the bar, scrolling on Facebook, true story, waiting for the next set to happen. And I looked on my phone and I saw this beautiful house that a realtor posted, hey, coming soon. It's my new listing. And I literally fell off my bar stool because I used to own a house exactly a block away. My first house that I bought when I was 22. And the house that was posted on Facebook was the house that I always wanted. How those homes where you drive by in your childhood neighborhood and you think, oh, if that ever comes up for sale, I want to buy that house, or at least I want to go in that house, or I want to know the owner of that house. Well,
Of
that was
course.
my house.
Yep.
That was the house, my dream house. So I literally was shaking, and I'm like, I messaged my friend, and I'm still getting goosebumps thinking about this moment in time. I'm like, I need to buy this house. And she's like, what? I'm like, and the market wasn't that great right then. I think it was not a great market at all. And I'm like, I have to buy this house. How do I see it? And she's like, okay, you can look at it tomorrow. Like, she didn't think that I was serious because it wasn't even in the MLS. It was just a post on Facebook. My husband walks in, I look at him, and I get that look in my face, like those crazy eyes. And I'm like, guess what, honey? I'm buying my childhood dream house. And he goes, wait, what? And he's like, you're serious? I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm buying this house. And he's like, no, honey, it's not a good time. And I looked at him and I said, yes, I am. That's why I have the self-directed IRA that I've been saving to buy a house. I'm going to use my funds for my self-directed IRA to buy my dream house. My money, honey. Like, I own 90 of that self-directed IRA. You own 10. So I am the majority owner of that IRA, and I'm going to do this. And he looks at me and goes, happy wife, happy life. Okay, let's do it. So he did not even see it. I went and looked at it myself. I got really emotional. I called my mom, said, I'm buying my childhood dream home. She's the really cute little brick cottage. I said, yep, that's the one. And so she's all excited. She tells me, go for it. I call the realtor. I say, I showed the house. I'm going to write the offer. And she's like, oh, I'm actually back at the house with my client. We're just talking about the listing going on the market. And I'm like, can I meet you now to present the offer? And she's like, okay. By that time, it had been put in the MLS. They were like people that are scheduling to show it. And I was really scared that I was going to lose out. So escalation clauses really weren't a thing back in the day, but I wrote an escalation clause. I was in World Market, and I'm plugging these companies. I'm not sponsoring them. It's just where I was. And they have these beautiful dining room tables. So I'm sitting on the dining room table in World Market writing the offer. So she meets me at World Market, Cost Plus World Market, and she picks up the offer. We do this conversation. She goes over to the owner. She gets it signed, comes back and gives it to me. So I love that place. I have great memories, and it's not that far away from my rental. And so I was delighted. I bought the house. We closed pretty quickly. The owner moved to Coeur d'Alene, which is the bedroom community of Spokane right next door. And I posted on Facebook after it closed, guess what? I just bought my childhood dream home. Well, a friend of mine, I had sold her house, and she saw my post, and she literally fell off her stool in her kitchen because she said to me in a message, oh my goodness, that is the house that my mom wanted to buy when she was younger, but another family bought it and she got beat out. I have to rent this house. And I'm like, oh, well, actually, I bought it to be a short-term rental because I want to expose as many people as possible to my childhood dream home because it's so amazing. And she was like, no, you can't do that. And Kathleen is my friend. Like, I love her. She's adorable. She's a singer. She's an artist. She's this most amazing creative woman. And I had sold her house, and she was a resident manager of a short-term rental property, believe it or not. So she was of the Ruby Suites. So she was the manager of the Ruby Suites, which is like a short-term rental in Spokane, ironically. And so, I can't make this story up. And so she tells me I have to look at it with my fiance. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I tell my husband, he's like, wait, what? We have all this furniture we bought for the house. And I'm like, well, I know, but she's my friend. She might not want to rent it. And then I'll just list it on the platforms. So she shows up and she's crying, and she brings him, and she's like, this is my house. I'm so excited. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I rent it to her under market because she couldn't afford. It's hard. So I didn't get my ROI right away because it's my friend, and she loved the house. And I thought, okay, so my goal is really to preserve the house and make people, get exposed to it and love it as much as I do. Well, okay. So my good friend still rents the house. I don't have a short-term rental, but if she ever leaves, guess what? I'll be ready. I will have to buy more furniture because I sold all that furniture, but it just makes me, I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry. it makes me so excited that she loves the house as much as I do. And it's my storybook cottage. And someday, hopefully someone will be able to enjoy it as much as Kathleen does. And so someday I'll have a short-term rental. I don't know. We built a 12-plex in the beginning of the pandemic, and we were going to turn one of the units into a short-term rental, which was our model unit. But in the pandemic, there was nothing available to rent, and we felt really bad. So we did not do it as a short-term rental, and we actually opened it up and we rented everything. And so I bought furniture for it, thinking I was going to turn it into a short-term rental, and that didn't happen. So I don't know. So I keep trying to have them, but people keep wanting to rent them long-term. So, so that's my story.
It's a beautiful story. I love that you still own the place. For a second, when you were telling the story, I thought you were going to say somebody beat you out and bought it out from under you, or it went live on the MLS and they did all those showings. And so I'm glad you still own it. I love the attitude. I love that you're helping your friend. I love that you have the big heart that you do. And I think that's awesome. And I think you will have a short-term rental in due time for sure. So I wanted to ask, what advice do you have for people that are maybe just hearing about short-term rentals or have been thinking about getting into short-term rentals for a while?
Well, if you want to really do this right, you need to really, really start paying attention to who is in the game. I mean, Lauren, honestly, the first time we met, we were in a Twitter space, and you were so eloquent in the way you explained short-term rentals to people in that space that had no idea about them. I think you really have to surround yourself with people who are knowledgeable, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, read up about it. I mean, there's a wealth of information out there at your fingertips. I do recommend that people listen to your podcast because I think that you really have the pulse of the market. And I'm not just saying that, I'm not getting paid for that. I just believe that in my heart. People now DM me, do you know about this podcast? I'm like, yes, I do. Have you heard about this person? And, you're in a Twitter space and they talk to me about what you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, and then Mary, there's another, I host Twitter spaces on Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific with two other people, Marianne, Chris, and we talk about real estate. So we invited you on our show and you were so gracious in really explaining, the terminology, the, kind of the nuts and bolts in a very quick conversation. I do think they need to work with a realtor that can help them navigate purchasing, someone who really understands investment properties, because it's not about just the short-term, return on your investment. You have to look at long game, like the end game, recognizing your dreams and realizing your potential and other people's potential and investing in them. You invest in yourself.
Beautifully said. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
So I'll just say that I have been a realtor in Spokane for over 27 years. I sell within an hour of Spokane. I'm not licensed in Idaho, but I have an amazing partner in Idaho. If you want to buy or sell or rent an Airbnb or VRBO or short-term rental or homestay or wherever you want, any of those platforms, I can help you out. But in Spokane specific, I am a residential agent. So I do residential, I do commercial. I'm a developer. We are building garage condos. GarageLodge.us is our website. It's awesome. We have a really fun clubhouse. You can buy those. It's a great write-off if you need some of that, if you're making too much money. And we also have multifamily projects. We're building a 36-plex next year right by the Amazon plant in Medical Lake, Washington, which is about 20 minutes from my house right now. If you can't drive, it's about a 25-minute drive across town. If you have to go more than 25 minutes, you're really in the boonies in Spokane.
How can people get in touch with you about Garage Lodge or anything else?
So it's really easy. If you go to my last name, so Bornhoft, BORN, H as in Henry, O as in Oscar, F as in Frank, T as in Tom.com. Like born in a loft, only Bornhoft. not like Hasselhoff, because I'm not him, but Bornhoft.com. That's our main website for our commercial brokerage. My bio's on there. You can click on my bio. You can click on the link. It'll take you to my residential real estate site. We do commercial, we do residential. Garage Lodge is actually on that website as well, but garagelodge.us is the website for Garage Lodge. But for me, Marianne at Bornhoft.com. Simple name, really easy way to get a hold of me. And I'm Marianne from Spokane. I'm the only realtor in Spokane named Marianne, so I'm out there.
Love it. I will put all of that in the show notes, and I'll put your Twitter handle as well, since that's how we met.
That would be great. Yeah. I try to use Spokane House as much as possible, but I sometimes I think on Instagram it's Marianne Bornhoft because Spokane House was taken, which sucks, but that's life. Yeah. So
I know I encounter that too. So I am on Twitter at Adulting is Easy. I'm also on Facebook. You can email me at realadultingiseasy@gmail.com. Check Marianne out on Twitter Spaces on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can check me out on Twitter Spaces Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Marianne and I have made adulting a little easier for you.